What's up guys, and welcome to the 2024 Mazda CX-50 Turbo Premium Plus. I've spent the last week with this CUV from Mazda, and I'm going to tell you what it's like to drive and to live with. I actually had a 2023 model of the Turbo Premium Plus CX-50 a little over a year ago, and I honestly really enjoyed the week I spent with that car because it offered such a good blend of design, build quality, that premium feeling you expect from a Mazda, and surprisingly really good driving dynamics for a small CUV that weighs almost 4,000 pounds. Now, Mazda has made some tweaks to this 2024 model, including revised shocks and tuning of the electric power steering system. So we're going to take this thing for a drive so we can see if this is still my favorite sub $50,000 CUV. So very familiar interior to me. I've driven basically every model in the Mazda lineup. This CX-50 is still one of the most impressive. The CX-90 obviously is a cut above, but it comes at a much higher price point. And I think this model, as spec'd $43,000 before destination and handling, it still feels really premium for that price point. This is a fully loaded model. You can get a non-turbo lower trim level for well under $40,000. I love the thin spoked, thin rimmed steering wheel, physical buttons that control your driving aids, your music, your phone calls. Love this design here with this cliff of climate control buttons. I very much prefer this design over the CX-50s, which is just buttons that are flush against the dash. This just makes it easier for me to not have to take my eyes off the road for too long when I want to change the AC settings. This comes with a heated steering wheel, 3-stage heated and cooled seats for both the driver and passenger, and it even comes with rear seat heating and rear AC vents. Still not the biggest fan of the stitching, as a sort of surgical look to it in my opinion, but overall the build quality is very good for low $40,000 range. Soft touch plastics and leather, everything just has a nice polished look and feel. Very satisfying switchgear and knobs. One complaint: piano black plastic. A lot of manufacturers are guilty of this. Even my Integra Type S has this. I just wish they would give it a matte finish. I don't know why they think piano black is the way to go. I do agree it looks really good when it's literally spotless and free of scratches, but that's the problem. It's never going to be spotless or free of scratches if you use this as your everyday vehicle. In the center console here, we do have two USB Type A ports, no USB Type Cs, unfortunately. We have a couple of USB Type A ports in the back seat as well. Glove box is slightly on the smaller side. There's not a whole ton of storage on the inside. Even the door pockets are a bit smaller. You definitely can't fit a large, water bottle or anything like that here. But you have to keep in mind, this is a compact CUV. It's not a 3-row. It's designed to compete with something like the Toyota RAV4. It is not a full-sized SUV or CUV, so just keep that in mind. Now, that being said, where that really benefits this CX-50 is the way it drives. So without further ado, let's turn it on. All right, so on the road in the 2024 CX-50. First things first, listen to that turn signal stock. Why is that sound so satisfying to me? I've never ever noticed the turn signal sound in any other vehicle except the CX-50. And I think the CX-30 might have the same sound, but the CX-5 doesn't have that satisfying snap, snap, snap. It just sounds so good. Anyways, when I first started driving this 2024 model year, I didn't know beforehand that Mazda had revised the suspension or steering. But one thing that I noticed immediately, especially when driving on the freeway, is that the suspension is a little bit more comfortable than before. Of course, one of the big downsides of the CX-50 compared to the CX-5, which is at a similar price point, is the fact that the CX-50 has a torsion beam rear suspension, which should mean it'll ride quite a bit worse than the independent rear suspension of the CX-5, and that was definitely the case with the 2023 model year. But I think with the revised dampers that Mazda has updated for this model year, a large amount of that suspension harshness has thankfully been removed. It still doesn't ride quite as soft and plush as CX-5, but it's really not far off now. Let's try to avoid getting in this truck's way. But yeah, I have to say, I've been actually pretty impressed with the ride quality of this 2024 model year. It is a noticeable improvement, subtle but noticeable. At this point, I have no complaints about how this vehicle rides. Despite softening this up, they've still retained the excellent driving dynamics. And that brings me on to the steering rack of this CX-50. Supposedly, it's now lighter, lower effort, but I have to say it's still the best steering rack in this class of vehicle that I've experienced. It's so direct, the on-center precision is truly remarkable for a 3,900 plus pound CUV. You can feel there's still a little bit of jiggliness to that rear end when we go over expansion joints at 70 miles an hour, but really it's a very, very minor complaint. But like I was saying, the steering of this vehicle is phenomenal. There is just so much precision and on-center feel. There's still a good amount of weighting to it as well. I would say it's likely still the heaviest steering rack in this class of vehicle that's currently on sale. And for you driving enthusiasts who still want some practicality, it's the perfect blend. You get good steering feel, you get a punchy, torquey 2.5 liter turbocharged Skyactiv inline 4-cylinder engine, made it to a pretty old at this point 6-speed torque converter automatic. But I have to say, I have no complaints with the way they've tuned this engine to work together with this transmission. Because there's just so much torque down low, you don't need more than 6 speeds. We're at 73 miles an hour, cruising on the freeway. The engine's barely over 2,000 RPM. It's nice and quiet. It's rated at 25 miles per gallon combined, although you can easily get close to 30 miles per gallon just cruising on the freeway. This engine is rated to use either 87 octane or up to 93 octane premium fuel. With 87 octane, you're looking at 227 horsepower and 310 pound-feet. But if you opt for 93 octane, that number goes up to 256 horsepower and around 320 pound-feet of torque. The torque figure tells the story here. It's not about the power, but look at this. We're in 6th gear, 2,000 RPM, and I'll give it a little bit of gas. Let's say 40% throttle. So it did downshift there, but still, there's so much torque on tap at all times. It actually makes this thing almost feel like a performance CUV when you're just putting around, especially the off-the-line acceleration is really, really impressive. And with this very smooth 6-speed automatic transmission, this thing's very easy to drive around. You never feel like you're lacking for power or hunting for gears. It's actually kind of nice that there's only 6 speeds because the transmission doesn't have all those extra gears to be confused by. This still comes with Mazda's suite of driving aids, which overall is pretty good, but I will say the lane keep assist doesn't work nearly as well as the system in my Integra Type S. It seems to be a lot less responsive in terms of steering me back into the lane. That said, the radar cruise control, the blind spot monitoring, all the other systems work phenomenally. Let's see if we can demonstrate a little bit of this off-the-line acceleration here. Again, it's not top-end power, it's that instant availability of torque anywhere you put your foot down, anywhere, anytime. That's what makes this vehicle feel so impressive to drive, in addition to the steering, and even the suspension feels fairly taut. Less body roll than you might think for a 4,000 pound CUV. Driving this around, spending some time with this vehicle, it just feels premium, it feels high quality. Even at an MSRP of just under $44,000, I feel like I'm sitting in something more expensive, to be honest. The seats are really, really nice and supportive and comfortable. They're just right. They're not overly bolstered. I can get the seat really nice and low as well, but still excellent visibility. Fairly thin A-pillars here. The heated and cooled seats work phenomenally. Actually, if I set the heated seat to level 3, it's almost uncomfortable how hot it gets. The heated steering wheel is fine, but I'm a little bit disappointed that it still only heats the 9 and 3 grips here. It doesn't heat the entire rim of the steering wheel like some other manufacturers do. The infotainment system is the same as before. It still has this 10-inch display that's recessed quite a bit. It's not meant to be used as a touchscreen. We're still relying on this rotary dial. It works fine, but I just think for Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, they're designed to be used with a touch screen, and so I do find myself a little frustrated at times using this dial to sequentially scroll through buttons and icons on the display when in a normal touchscreen setup I could just skip all of that and click exactly what I want. Let's say I'm on the left side here and I want to change my music. I have to first push the dial to the right and then scroll it to select these different buttons. It's just not that intuitive, and it takes a little bit of getting used to, and it's not as quick as simply being able to touch exactly what you want. We still have a combination of digital and analog gauges for the gauge cluster. The left and right hand side gauges are still analog, but they've very cleverly designed the center gauge to be digital, and yet it still matches the theme. You almost have to do a double take to see if it's digital or analog. So you can have your driving aids set up so you can see your blind spot monitoring, your lane keep assist, or you can have a more traditional tachometer. So on this rougher section of the freeway, there's still a little bit of road noise, but it's not bad. The back seat is pretty usable. I would say if you're taller and you need more legroom, it might be just a little bit tight. But then again, if you're buying a vehicle of this class and this size, you shouldn't expect a huge amount of rear legroom to begin with. Headroom, thankfully, is fine in the back. Also, I just love the exterior styling of this vehicle as well. Even when I park it, I do a look back. I don't typically do that for SUVs or CUVs, but this one just looks so spot on. It has a much more muscular and athletic look compared to the very softened, rounder look of the CX-5, and I really appreciate that. I don't love the plastic cladding around the fenders. It does look a little bit cheap and tacky to me, but I do appreciate the wide haunches, the wider stance. It's a little bit lower than the CX-5. Overall, I think Mazda really knocked it out of the park with this exterior design language. The Bose sound system is pretty good as well. My only complaint with it is that it does get muffled a bit when I'm driving at highway speeds. Every time I exit and come to a stop or decrease my speed to say under 30 or 35 miles an hour, the music sounds really excellent, really crisp, punchy bass, but then the moment I get back on the freeway, it just gets a little bit drowned out by the tire noise. Another thing I find slightly annoying is the way these memory seats work. There's two settings, a little bit hard to reach, they're down here, but you can't set them at speed. I know a lot of manufacturers are like that nowadays, where they just only want you to be parked in order for you to be able to access certain controls, like the memory seats. The steering wheel also is manually adjustable. It does tilt and telescope. Let's see, I've been averaging 24 miles per gallon over the last 400-ish miles. That's decent for a CUV of this size. This 2.5-liter turbo has been out for some time. It's not the most advanced or efficient engine out there, but it definitely does its job. And the acceleration is more than adequate. This engine paired to the CX-9 chassis feels nowhere near as potent. I think it's really well suited to vehicles under 4,000 pounds. The Mazda 3 Turbo, the CX-5, the CX-30, and the CX-50 are all very well suited for this amount of power and torque. In the CX-9, it really did feel a bit underpowered. So overall, I'm really happy with what they've done to this 2024 model year. They've kept the really excellent steering precision and steering feel, at least for a CUV. Do I think it steers as well as a modern GT3 like some reviewers apparently think? No, definitely not. It doesn't have the feedback through the wheel or the sharpness and response that you get with the front ends of a dedicated sports car. But again, for a CUV, this is Definitely by far the best steering rack I've ever experienced. I'd love to compare this to something like a Porsche Macan and see how it stacks up. The steering is still pretty heavy, so don't go out there buying this car just because you think the steering is way lighter now. It's not. It's definitely heavier than the CX-5. The suspension, however, is significantly improved. However, you can still tell it's a torsion beam rear end. It's not going to be as compliant as an independent rear suspension setup. The rest of the driving dynamics are still really excellent. Great low down acceleration, good passing power, smooth shifting transmission. In terms of usability, it's the same as the prior model year. It's just the right size for someone like me who doesn't need to haul a ton of stuff, but can definitely appreciate the cargo space that this thing offers. I'm just very happy with this car. If you couldn't already tell, it's still my favorite sub $50,000 SUV or CUV on sale today. If they could make a hybrid version of this that still has that punchy low-end torque while offering something like 30 to 35 miles per gallon, this would be an absolute home run of a CUV, especially if they can offer that for $50,000 or less. Don't know if Mazda has plans to do that. They have gone hybrid with the CX-90. If that technology could trickle down to the lower end models, this might be one of the best daily drivers you could buy. A big shout out to Mazda for providing the CX-50 2024 model year for review. Let me know what you think about this new revised suspension setup and steering system. If you've had a chance to compare this against the prior generation, or I should say the prior model year. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.